Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here at this conversation with Paul Shapiro. Just a few quick housekeeping notes. We're very pressed for time in this talk. We have a quick turnaround. There's a 2 o'clock concert, which I'm sure you all want to go to and we want to go to. So we got to keep things tight and moving, but we hope to have a few minutes at the end for if anybody has questions. But then we definitely need to clear out of here beginning at 1:45 so you can get over there and get your seats. Anyway, so I'm here with Paul Shapiro, who will be leading his amazing band and singers tomorrow night, Saturday night, headlining concert. Hope you're all planning on coming because it's going to be definitely a highlight of the entire Yidstock Festival. Paul's been here before, but this will be kind of a new program that you haven't heard yet. And so without further ado, Paul.
Hello, everybody. Great to be here, Seth, and thank you for all you do to make this festival so special in such a wonderful place. Every time I walk in here, I'm just amazed at how fantastic it is and how rich it is and how important it is. And I am thrilled when I see the growth in Yiddish-speaking people, especially college age. It's amazing. They're fluent and they're studying the literature, and it's just great.
Terrific. So, Paul, you have such an amazingly deep and broad and wide and profound musical experience and career and creativity. Goes all over the map. Can you boil this down in about 5 or 10 minutes? And you, from what I understand early on, had an interest in jazz. And then I know that you came to the East Village during the punk rock era, and you had a punk rock band, and then you got into the downtown avant-garde and other jazz stuff and funk stuff, which
Yep.
So can you, and then you wound up doing Jewish music.
Back to the roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you take us along there in 5 or 10 minutes? And
Yeah, we'll try to make it quick.
How you got to the where you are today?
Well, I grew up regular Long Island upbringing, and I loved music as a kid, and they made me play clarinet in 4th grade instead of saxophone. By the time I was in 9th grade, they started to have a jazz band at school, and I was like, I want to play saxophone. And I didn't really like the clarinet because it was squeaky, and I didn't really hear the sound, wasn't in my head. And I started to play saxophone then, finally, and I just took off, and I loved it, and just played all the time, and started to really improve. And I went to school in Montreal at McGill, and I took a lot of jazz studies there, which was just beginning. And I came to New York in the summer of 1978. Don't do the math. And I was very much a jazz-inspired musician at the time, but I was also very aware of the music that I grew up with, and that generation was really very interesting. I eventually made my own kind of punk funk band. We were really trying to bring all of our influences together, because a lot of us, we loved jazz, we could play bebop, we were studying Charlie Parker, we were studying John Coltrane, Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk, but we grew up with Motown, we grew up with the Beatles, we grew up with electric guitars, so we were all trying to create a music that had all of these elements in it. And it was quite exciting time. And the East Village was full of very creative people who had come from all over the world and, really were in there to do something different. So I played a lot of, I created my own band at the time, and we played places like the Mud Club and CBGB's.
And the name of that band was?
Foreign Legion, because it was a kind of It was a collective, as in Legion, but it was unique and different, as in it was foreign. It wasn't like traditional or typical. So, and we played Danceteria and the Ritz and all of these clubs that you read about now because people are kind of fascinated with that era. It was pretty interesting. The East Village was a real bubbling pot of creativity and all kinds of people and artists and a lot of amalgamation, a lot of artists that became musicians in punk bands who just started playing instruments 10 days ago, and all of a sudden they're in a rock band, with cool hair and interesting though, creative. Anyway, so I really never had a day job since I was 23. I always managed to make it with music. I played plenty of weddings, which was kind of my day job. I'd go out on the weekends and, play Jewish weddings and make money, and then I'd have my week free to be creative and get my gigs and stuff, and I really clawed my way through. And eventually things, I started to do a lot of studio work for the young producers, and I was on records like with Queen Latifah, and I'm on a Michael Jackson record. I played flute on a Frankie Knuckles record that was called The Whistle Song, that was still one of the most heard songs in the dance music, electronic dance, because I put my jazz improvisation and stuff on their records. But I always did it, and I was always looking for a way to enter into these people's music and not just put something else on top, but to actually find what their music brought out to me. And I think that's why I got a lot of work at doing that, because I was really enmeshing myself in their music and not just kind of, doing something on top of it that was something that I knew from, playing jazz or something. So that was that. And then I was in a famous band called Brooklyn Funk Essentials that played in Turkey and made a record over there with Turkish musicians. And all through the 80s, I played in another band besides Foreign Legion. I played in a wonderful jazz band called the Microscopic Septet, which was very well known for kind of playing old school, new school, avant-garde. It was a pan-era jazz band. Anyway,
tell us a few of the other musicians, because I feel like the Microscopic Septet just spawned all these other amazing musical careers.
Well,
besides yours.
The Micros had a really great impact on a lot of musicians. The bass player tomorrow night is my buddy Dave Hofstra, who played in the Micros with me, and we were together all those years. And the other musicians, Joel Forrester was a piano player who used to play for Thelonious Monk when he was in his last years. He'd go over to Thelonious' house and play for him. And Philip Johnston was the band leader, and Philip and Joel wrote the music. And Philip now lives in Australia. And these were really interesting times, and those guys specifically were also part of the whole broader group of avant-garde musicians in the East Village that later became, embedded in the knitting factory. Michael Dorf's knitting factory became a real sort of factory for people putting things together and playing with each other as bands and going on tour to Europe. There was a lot of touring in Europe at the time. This was late 80s, early 90s, and through the 90s. And a lot of Europeans really were, got to experience a lot of different kind of jazz musicians through those tours, because it wasn't the old guard, playing post-bop or avant-garde. It was a new crowd. Noise was part of it, and avant-gardism, but also, people were skilled in all the different kinds of jazz. And so it was a very interesting period, and that was a very good time for getting that music into a little bit more mainstream. People got to hear it. Anyway, around that time, John Zorn created Tzadik Records, and he called the imprint Radical Jewish Culture. There was a sort of a classical music and an avant-garde new music, and then there was radical Jewish culture. And this is where things started to change, because previously it was not hip to play Jewish music, period. Jewish musicians, like people in Hollywood, were not known for keeping their names. They changed their names. It was something, there was many of us, because we loved music, and we were good at it, and we also loved jazz, and were very fluent in that tradition. But it was really Zorn who really kind of stepped out and said, this is radical and this is cool, and I'm not pretending that I'm not Jewish. I'm going to come right out and play this avant-garde Jewish music. Nobody had done that before.
And he had already established himself
Yes.
as like the lion of the downtown avant-garde.
Absolutely.
Without any reference to Jewishness
Correct.
in the music or in his identity.
Yes.
So from that perch,
Correct.
for him to do that
Yeah.
was all the more powerful and meaningful.
It was, because many would get, notoriety and tour, Japan and get commissioned to write interesting music, but he specifically came out as a Jewish musician. I say came out, it's kind of funny, but I mean, he called one of his imprints Radical Jewish Culture, and I'd known him for years. He was actually in the Microscopic Septet at the very beginning. He was in the first incarnation of the Micros, as they're known. And anyway, he started making these records. And he called me to play on a record by Daniel Zamir, who is a very wunderkind Israeli saxophonist, composer. And that was a great record. One of the musicians on it was Anat Cohen, who has become a very famous clarinet player. She was playing saxophone at the time. She was still playing clarinet, but in that band there was a bunch of saxophonists, and that was an interesting record. And then I played on my very, very close friend Stephen Bernstein's record, also on Tzadik, called Diaspora Soul. Stephen was in my band Foreign Legion. We go back to the early 80s. We're still very much in touch and love playing together. And at that point, I had some ideas to do my own record for Zorn. And so I can't remember if he called me or if I called him, but one way or another, I had an opportunity to make my own record. And I did, and I called it Midnight Minyan. And it was really a special time, because we were banging our heads against the wall to get signed to a record company, and nobody was particularly interested in the music we did. In terms, it was all about either disco, or it was about punk rock. I mean, this hybrid that we were all making in the 80s, it didn't really make it into the industry. So to be able to make a record as a leader and to really conceive of it, was a big deal for us, for many of us, for Stephen, for me, for Roberto Rodriguez, there's lots of us. And anyway, I had this opportunity to make a Jewish record, and I was basically coming from jazz and funk. There's, jazz and R&B. And what happened was, I started to play the melodies that I remembered growing up with as a kid. And that's another story that I'll tell you about in a second. But I had a Jewish upbringing. It was a kind of a conservative Jewish upbringing. We didn't go to temple that much. But I went to Hebrew school, and one Saturday morning when I was about 10 or 11, my dad kicked me out of the house and said, "You're going to junior congregation." Now, I don't know if anybody went to junior congregation, but that was a thing, and it was a shorter service. It was an hour long, and there was one adult there, but it was run by kids. And I didn't like Hebrew school like every kid. I would have rather been outside playing ball, you know. But I went there, and I really liked the singing. I loved the melodies, and I enjoyed it. And I became a leader, actually, you know, so that I was like a little mini rabbi, you know. So when Zorn gave me the opportunity to make a record, a lot of people that were making his records were kind of using Jewish sonorities and, you know, the Fragish mode and the Misha Beirach mode and Jewish, you know, rhythms and stuff. But I started to revisit some of these melodies that I learned around that time. And I really re-envisioned them through a jazz lens, as it were. And I really changed them, and I fused all of these influences that I had building. And, you know, it was really a new beginning for me because it caught on. You know, people were really interested to hear what this music was.
Can we hear a
Yeah.
short clip of
Okay, here's this is, see if you recognize this. First one to name the song gets a piece of bubble gum. Now, so that was that one. Now here's an interesting one. See if you can recognize this melody. What'd you say? Absolutely. It's da da da. So this is what that one was. This is what it sounded like when I sang it as a 13-year-old at 76 pounds. Right? Sorry about the cracked note. That comes for free. Yeah. Not me. That was 14. But anyway, so I was thinking about what songs to do, and I played it just like I played it. And I would play it, and then I went, you know. Etc. And so that's how things started to happen. Now check this one out. Where is it? It's missing. That's all right.
I'll let you know that we've got 10 more minutes.
Oh God.
Yeah. So, can you get us to today?
Yeah. Okay. Here, there's one more. This is a beauty. This makes me cry. Go ahead. What is it? No, it's close, but it's Eitz Chaim Hi. The one they, at the end of the Torah service when they're closing the Eitz Chaim Hi limachazikim ba v'tom. Anyway, I could talk about that one for a long time too. But Seth is right. So right now, tomorrow night, I'm going to be doing a band that I called Paul Shapiro's Ribs and Brisket. And I started doing it when I was making these records for Zorn that were kind of using these melodies that I grew up with, and also writing original music in that style. And it's not just, the old melodies. I also became aware of a lot more Jewish music that had crossed over with African American singers in the 1930s and 40s. And there's just fabulous music. Cab Calloway chanting like in Yiddish, gibberish, and all kinds of crossovers, some of which are known, like Bamir Bis Shane, by the Andrews Sisters, or Ziggy Elman doing, but there was a lot more. There was a guy named Slim Gaillard, who was an African-American jazz musician, who was a very funny guy. He played piano with his hands upside down. He was amazing. He had a record store. He had a record label. He created a new language. Everything was Vauti this and Aruni this. And he wrote tunes about food anyway, but he had a tune called Dunk and Bagel, and he had a tune called Matzo Ball, and he had a tune called Meshuggah Mambo. This is an African-American guy. He was famous for Flatfoot Flugie. That was his biggest hit, but he had a lot of really funny tunes. So I put this band together, and we started to play some of this music for fun, because I just loved it. I always loved jazz that was sort of a pre-R&B jazz, like Louis Jordan kind of music, where it was very jazzified, but it also was popular, and it had humor in it, and it had good rhythm in it. It was radio friendly, and I always liked that stuff. So I put this band together, and it grew. We did lots of gigs, and the repertoire would grow, and people would come up and say, "You guys have to play Essen," and I'd say, "Essen, what's that?" And then I'd find this tune, and it was about the Catskills. It was orange juice, tomato juice, and grapefruit juice, and apple juice, baked apple stew, prunes pickled, herring pickled, lox smoked pepper. Like all these tunes from the Catskills, and we found Mickey Katz, and we that kind of stuff, and it was just a bevy of great music. However, recently, just a couple of years ago, I was watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I'm listening to the music there, and this music supervisor had found fantastic music that, and still does, to put underneath this show, because it takes place in the late 50s, and she had music by the Barry sisters, right? And she had all this really great 50s music, and much of it with a Jewish tom, a Jewish taste, And so I said, let's do some of that. So we've kind of morphed the Ribs and Brisket into now it's Ribs and Brisket plays the music of Mrs. Maisel. And we've been really having fun with it. I really hope you come tomorrow night, because I have Scylla Owens is the singer that I've had all through the Ribs and Brisket Revue, and she is sensational. She teaches at Hunter College, and she teaches at Adelphi, and she can sing opera, and she can sing in different languages, but she is a real jazz singer. Bluesy.
We did a concert a few years ago at Carnegie Hall, a Yiddish concert, and Scylla pretty much almost stole the show with her rendition of Bublitsky.
Yeah. And we found a version of Bublitsky that was in English that we did, but she also sings in Yiddish too. But the one we did was a very fun version of Bublitsky. But anyway, and then I also had started working with Eleanor Risa, who you just heard giving that talk about turning your cell phone off. She is an amazingly gifted, talented, wonderful neshama, beautiful heart.
And performs this evening at 5
5 o'clock.
Yeah, you must see her. And so we were working together on a couple of different gigs, and I decided that with all of that Barry Sisters material, you know, the duet stuff, they were a great duet team, Jewish. Their Bagelman Sisters was their real name. They became the Barry Sisters. They were very, very popular in Jewish circles, mostly Jewish circles in the 1950s. But anyway, I said, I got to put these two together. And they are quite the team. And so we do a lot of harmony, which is wonderful. And we combine this kind of, we do a tune, I don't want to give it away, but one of the tunes we do is called Yes, My Darling Daughter. She brought it in because she knew a version of it sung by Adelaide Hall, who had sung with Duke Ellington, Fats Waller, and Scylla just thought it would be fun to do in the band. And we did it, and somebody came up and said, you know, that's Joch mein teure Tochter, you know? And I said, what? Turns out it was a Yiddish song, you know, Joch mein teure Tochter, yes, my darling daughter, and the Barry Sisters did it. And so now we do a version that combines both of those versions. But then I got to tell you that once I was sitting right in this room and Hank Isnetsky was up there, and he said, you know, it's actually a Ukrainian folk song.
Of course.
And then I played it once at the Cornelia Street Cafe in Manhattan, and Janusz Makush, who runs the Jewish festival in Krakow, the Jewish Culture Festival, he's just a brilliant, wonderful person. He's sitting there getting all teary-eyed in the first row because he said, I used to sing that song in 3rd grade. So the song is just, you know, got a history unto itself.
Wow. That's great.
Should we ask if anybody's got any questions?
Yeah,
I know we're going to run out of time.
We have a few minutes for questions, and then we'll get out of here.
If you don't ask any questions, I'll keep talking.
In the
Go
back.
ahead. Well, no, that's a very good question, because when I first did this, I was a little bit, I was wondering, particularly among those who were more religious than me, how they would take to this, you know? And they love it. I've played for Orthodox congregations. People of all stripes really enjoy it. They do not have a problem with it, and they don't think that somehow I'm trifling with it. You know, they're as long as you don't play it on Shabbos, you know, that's the difference. You know, that is not cool, you know, to perform live. But other than that, I was worried about that. I'm saying, what are they going to think about this? I'm playing the 1,000-year-old melody before the Haftorah. I'm playing the Eitz Chaim Chi. I'm playing the Kiddush, the Friday night Kiddush. You know, I'm playing Sim Shalom. You know, I mean, I'm playing these stuff. Not a problem. And it's funny, but I think that with the rise of a lot of this music, I think that people who are kind of culturally Jewish may be a little bit more brought into, you know, Judaism through performing. I mean, a friend of mine, Greg Wall, is a saxophonist. He became a rabbi. He was studying with his son, and he got fascinated by it. He became a rabbi. And for a little while in the East Village, he had a big band called Ein Sof Orchestra, and we'd rehearse and perform at a synagogue on East 6th Street, the Indian restaurant block, which is now not so Indian restaurant-y anymore. But you know that after the gig, we'd have a little minyan. We'd go into the shul and we'd actually daven together, and and it was things like that where there would be a transference, you know, where something that was just about the music would move into perhaps a little more of a religious area, you know?
I think you see this play out in just one specific way. It plays out in many different ways, but one that some of you or a lot of you may be familiar with, and that's the music at B'nai Jeshurun on the Upper West Side. So their musical movement really kind of was analogous and contemporaneous and included some of the same people that Paul has been talking about, and creating this, beautiful new sound at what I think is a conservative synagogue.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about music not being in the synagogue, is it's kind of weird, I mean, nobody's exactly sure where it came from, and it's nusach. I mean, it's not nusach. I mean, it's not in stone, in the Torah, as I understand. It's tradition, it's a way of. So it has kind of hampered, a little bit of us intertwining the music in the synagogue, but it's happening more and more. A lot of us play at Reform synagogues for their services, and it really enhances it, and music is a great thing, and just because instrumental music is great too, churches sure don't hold back, they have bands with drums and bass and guitar, and so hopefully we're getting a little more into that as the conservative movement is warming to it, and
Anybody else have a question? Yes, back there.
Yeah, well, I think there is a lot of new Jewish music happening. There really is, and it's creeping into the synagogue. There's a lot of people that are writing new melodies for actual synagogue, and there's a lot of new music being written. But there is a lot of people that are rediscovering the tradition, particularly in klezmer, where they are unearthing klezmer music that is being found literally in trunks, and in places like this, and people go through it and are reinvigorating older music, but there is a lot of new music happening. There is. And I mean, it was nice that I didn't have to worry about licensing. You know what I mean? When I used these older melodies, that was good. I did write some original pieces as well, but I didn't do it because they were public domain. I did it because I was reaching back to my roots. So that really wasn't something that I was like, well, I can't use that one because it's, I'd have to pay, licensing fees, I mean, I basically did it because I was moved to do it. Here is one more thing. This is a tune I wrote on that Midnight Minyan record that is an original composition.
And we'll end with